while I believed in my mission and vision at the beginning, of course, it's even stronger now that I'm seeing behind the curtains. World famous. It's called the Manneken Pis, and it's a little fountain, a little boy. You should Google it. It's very funny. It's a little boy that's
a
little boy that's peeing, and it was leaking, believe it or not.
Well, no, wait, Alex, I'm not going to let you get by with that one.
Hello and welcome to The Stream, an unscripted, unedited, free-flowing conversation featuring guests who reject the status quo with a bias for action in the world of water and beyond. My name's Tom Freyberg, and I'm an environmental journalist and content creator specializing in water.
And I'm Will Sarney, a water strategy advisor doing my part to solve wicked water problems.
And today we are thrilled to be joined by Alex McCormack, who is the founder and CEO of Shayp. Alex, great to see you and welcome to The Stream.
Thanks very much, Tom. Thanks for having me.
Alex, you're a brave soul for doing this.
Yeah. Firstly, thanks for agreeing, not really knowing what you've let yourself in for. But I think the reason
I'm absolutely delighted to be on this famous stream. It's I've looked at episodes myself. I'm absolutely delighted. I feel very privileged to be here.
Well, what a kind young man you are.
He
says the right thing, right, Will? Good way to start.
I thought you sent him an email with talking points, right? It's like, Alex, lead off with.
So, Alex, there's loads we want to talk to you about today. But firstly, just congratulations. I mean, even before we kind of started planning about having you on the show, you announced that we didn't intend to talk about today was being awarded the B Corp Certified company, which was huge news for Shayp and for yourself as a founder. So maybe give us a kind of a few words on that. Yeah, congrats.
Yeah, definitely. That's like one of the latest things. It took us about a whole year really to get that up in place. We had somebody working on that around the clock. As a sort of a master thesis, and yeah, I think like what I'm really proud about is that it's a recognition in regards to what I've been trying to personally put in place from day one,
right.
And the team have been putting in place as well over the past 3 years. And yeah, I mean it's tied to our mission, of course, which is to improve water efficiency globally in buildings. And then of course, like we try to reflect that in our DNA in the business on a day-to-day basis. It's like the values regarding sustainability and governance. And I think it's a first step at least to proving that we can set up a company that holds these values and that is sustainable, on top of course addressing this massive challenge in regards to the water sector, which is I don't think there's many companies that are, let's say, unicorns in the water sector today, but hopefully that's where the next step will be.
Yeah, I think based on recent raises, there's some half unicorns, but we're still waiting for the pure play unicorn in water, right?
Alex, it's early in the year, so anything is possible, right? And you're obviously in the right sector. I mean, in terms of digital tech solutions, that's a hot segment of technology innovation right now for obvious reasons. Hey, Tom and Alex, it just struck me that we've had 3 guests this season, and 2 out of the 3 have B Corps. So this could be the stream season for B Corp companies.
There you go. Like,
it might reflect as well the philosophy of people going into the water sector.
I believe you're right. you know, I mean, people in the water sector are passionate and believe that they're having an impact, you know, while also building a commercially viable business. But maybe what we're seeing with the increase in B Corp companies is really an ability to communicate that externally. And I know this sounds like a commercial for B Corp, but it's a personal aha moment. And I don't have those often. So
it's a stamp of approval and a kind of benchmark so that you know your supply chain and your business and your purpose is anchored to sustainability, right? And am I right in saying that it kind of changes the bedrock and it hardwires it into the business? So even if, say, down the line you go to sell the company, whoever buys it has to comply with kind of how the company's rooted in becoming a B Corp. Is that correct in saying that?
Yeah, absolutely. We've had to change our social status so that it's reflected within the social status of in the governance of the company.
Right.
And then on top of that, you get, I think it's every 3 years, you get another assessment. So you could lose it in essence. So yeah. And then on top of that, of course, like some other partners or people that want to work with you might be looking at a B Corp certification and saying, so if you're building that network as you grow, of course it anchors the fact that that's important to the company and to the business. Yeah.
And I think as a startup looking to attract the right people with that clear purpose, having that kind of B Corp benchmark really helps with that, right? Because you think environmentally conscious, whether they're programmers or designers or engineers looking to kind of get on board the right company, knowing that you guys have been through the due diligence to get that status is one of the reasons, I think, to do it as well.
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned that. Like, we're currently hiring some account managers and account executives, and we're getting good talent because they're like, I'm at a turning point. I want to do something that's meaningful in my life.
Right.
Yeah. So it's definitely a way to attract talent, and it makes it more legit, really.
Changing values. That's really interesting and not surprising in a lot of ways. You know, there's no shortage of surveys that show that people want to work for companies that have a mission, have an impact. You know, they want to work for digital companies. Well, it seems like you're in the right place, Alex.
Yeah.
How's that?
No, it's just I mean, I get up. I'm proud of what's being done. It definitely gets me motivated in the morning, and so does everybody. And then I mean, as a CEO of the company, it's really my role to get everybody behind the mission and the vision. And it's pretty easy if it's really driving something that's impactful. Maybe like speaking of which, I had a kickoff talk for the year of 2022 with the whole team, and last year, so maybe just like a quick reminder for the audience of what we do. It's basically, we're helping property professionals drive down water usage by eradicating leakages in their buildings. And the problem stemming from the fact that we observed that nearly 20% of the water usage in commercial and multi-residential properties are due to leakages. So it's really crazy. And last year we looked into ways of being able to find other partners, such as environmental consultancy offices, but also water utilities. And major milestone that we hit was contracting with the water utility space, and so it really led us to understanding more about the water sector. And I was saying at the beginning of the year, it's actually having talked to field technicians who are, dealing with water reservoirs and having to deal with water demand, and talking to all these people, it became more frightening than reassuring. Where in countries like, even in Belgium, in places where, yeah, you would think that it rains a lot. There are places where the reservoirs are on the brink of it. There's not enough pressure to be able to provide water, and that's because they depend on ground resources and they're not renewing fast enough compared to the growth of population, the growth of water demand, climate change. And I was saying that, funny enough, like, while I believed in my mission and vision at the beginning, of course, it's even stronger now that I'm seeing behind the curtains a bit more.
So behind the curtain is frightening.
Yeah.
That could be the title of this episode of the stream. And by the way, Alex, you use the word audience. I don't know if Tom told you, but we don't have an audience. So this is just the three of us chatting, by the way.
Yeah. Right. It's
Alex,
where we tend to say that after they've been on, not during, right? Just to
I'm sorry. I my mistake. And Alex, look, you got 20 minutes to get used to my bizarre New York humor. So but you're speechless now.
Well, I think he thought he phrased it as a famous podcast, thinking there's going to be a big audience. You've just shown him behind the curtain of the stream, Will. Thanks. But Alex, you're I mean, from looking at your site and stuff, one of your missions is to save 100 billion liters of water in 3 years, right?
Yeah.
That's one of the things. And when did the 3 years? Which 3 years are we talking about? Kind of.
Well, I mean, if I want to be honest with you, I feel like we're pushing it back every 6 months or so. But I mean, it's a bit like Elon Musk, right? It's a bit like Elon Musk, but it's like autonomous driving.
Oh God!
Next
we're
year.
we're gonna get sued now, Tom.
No, but in reality,
your communication manager is going to love us, Alex, for this. So you almost need an asterisk in 3 years. The start date not to be confirmed. Basically, that's fine.
No,
but I think to be more serious, I think that's a great, fantastic mission, because we often talk about water leakage within the utility network, where you're looking at figures 30% on average around the world, but actually within buildings, as you mentioned, 20% plus more on average, and people are perhaps unaware of how much water their buildings are leaking until you guys come in and tell them, more often than not, right?
Yeah, so I'll tell you like the story of how Shayp started to illustrate that. So I was working for the city of Brussels, and my goal was to reduce the carbon footprint across 300 buildings by 30%. And that was mainly through energy efficiency. And one day I got this really strange call by a fellow colleague. She's an architect, and she says, "Alex, there's this kindergarten where children are getting sick chronically all the time." And I was like, okay. And so I kind of had I was like, what's going on? She said, it's so bad that there's a petition signed by the parents saying that, there's something going on. Why are these kids getting sick all the time? So there's something in the jargon of buildings that we call sick building syndrome, SBS.
Yeah.
And so I went out there and I investigated with a hygrometer. And I put the hygrometer back in my pocket. It was tropical. It was inside. It was super humid and pretty warm. And so I had my suspicions. And what happened was I looked at the water meter and saw if there was any nighttime water consumption, basically. And I was able to assess that there was 32 liters per hour that were going into the void somewhere in that building. So I confirmed that, sent some plumbers out there. They investigated, took a photo, and there was 2 burst pipes underneath the building, with one that had 1 meter of stalactites of lime that had built up. And I looked back at the water bills, and it had remained unchanged for 10 to 15 years. So what that meant is that the leak was there for maybe a millennia. And that particular event led me to doing a large field investigation across all these assets, and I was able to evaluate and assess that there was over 30% of the water usage in those buildings that were due to leakages, such as leaky toilets, leaky water softeners, leaky heating systems, burst pipes, faulty valves, and so forth. Well, today the city of Brussels is now a client. In fact, it's not 30%, it's 40%, maybe even more. But the thing is this is what we see across the board. And we see this especially in places where, in buildings where there's higher vacancy rates. There's probably less inclination to report leakages, or they just go unnoticed, and people are unaware of this.
Oh, right. Sure.
Yeah, I mean, a leaky toilet, it's like that's just barely dripping. You could barely see it. It equates to somebody that you're hosting all year round, all day, all day. So they're using the toilets, they're washing their clothes, everything. So yeah.
Yeah, that's not surprising in a lot of ways. I mean, I think that's sort of one of the universal problems in the world of water, that you could get that percentage of leakage and no one knows. And, one could argue that maybe no one really cares until you really start collecting the data and analyzing the data and realizing what the impacts are. And also, I mean, it sort of goes back to your roots. I mean, you started looking at energy and carbon. Well,
Correct.
That liter of water has a carbon and energy footprint associated with it. So there's a way to really integrate the dimensions of that loss in a very different way.
Yeah, it's approximately 0.150 kilos per cubic meter. That's the embodied
Wow.
energy footprint. Yeah.
And I didn't even set you up for that. That was really good, Alex.
We can probably put that on the screen as a data point. There you go.
Right. We'll have formulas, in
There we
the in the podcast. That's good.
But I think what's interesting then, Alex, about your origin story is clearly you were struck by this massive challenge, children getting sick, but actually perhaps the genesis for Shayp was because you went on to solve a massive challenge. That was a key driver. Some people, I think, look at the water sector and they see it as a massive thing. They think, oh, there's money to be made, and they come in for the wrong reasons. But actually that challenge that you're setting out to fix was kind of a great spark for your journey. So from that moment then, what was the rest of the origin story?
Oh yeah. So from that moment, it really just, from that observation, I was actually trying to prescribe solutions to see, okay, is there anything on the market that can do anything about this? And they were generally very complicated to install, very costly. And then even if they were installed, it was a real nightmare to pilot and to be able to do it. Basically, think of it as you still had to be behind your computer doing all the calculations and stuff.
Right.
So the initial idea was, what can we do this in a more scalable fashion, more cost-effective way, where all the analytics and everything is done for you, and all you need now is just to take action. And that's what Shayp is. So it's composed in three parts. So the acquisition of the data. So we use smart meter data, or we use ultra low power IoT to aggregate the water consumption data. We run through that our cloud-based AI that analyzes completely autonomously the raw consumption data of the building using only one measuring point, and we can understand how much water is being wasted, how many leakages are in there, what's the likely cause, where what actions need to be done to basically reduce that waste. And that's how we're driving down on average the consumption in buildings by 20%.
Now, I got a question for you, which I think ties into business strategy. You can do this for any structure. So you're focused on buildings, but it could be a manufacturing plant.
One of our proudest moments in terms of like what we're monitoring is not an industrial plant. It's not a big building. It's a tiny little fountain that's world famous. It's called the Manneken Pis, and it's a little fountain, a little boy. You should Google it. It's very funny. It's a little boy that's a
Oh
statue
yeah.
of a little boy that's peeing, and it was leaking. Believe it or not.
Well, no, wait, Alex, I'm not going to let you get by with that one. The little boy was leaking. Maybe the statue was leaking also. So just to be clear here.
Yeah, it was leaking 55 liters per hour. And it and to tell you like that was nearly 500,000 liters of water per year. And that was only, just to tell you, is only 1% of all the water loss across the buildings of the city of Brussels. But
Oh,
it's the
wow.
one that made the most noise. It went famous. I think it even appeared in Japan Times or something.
So Tom, I think, we don't do edits, but that might need to be an edit, like what came out of my mouth. I can't believe it.
A pull-out soundbite stroke, toilet humor for social media. We can definitely pull that out.
Yeah, a little boy humor. I can't believe I went down that path. So Alex, your comms person just is going to fall over after this one.
We were warned, right? But I think Alex, what appears to me on this is because you mentioned that a lot of buildings are unaware of how much water they're leaking, right? So say you're building agnostic. So say I'm head of maintenance and you come to me and then we run your system and I realize, bloody hell, we're losing 50 liters a day, 50 liters every couple of days. Mm-hmm. I then have to go to my boss to get this signed off, to sign the expenses. Your system will make me potentially look bad, right, as a head of maintenance, because my boss is potentially going to say, hang on, Tom, I pay you to do this, to spot leaks. So part of this, is this an education process that you kind of have to go through and actually say in the long term, the cost that you'll be saving from using Shayp to spot leaks to keep things more efficient is worthwhile, the investment?
Yeah, this is like the first thing that we would get, because that's already a step down the road in the customer journey. The first step is actually that the maintenance guy would say, I don't have leaks in my building.
the status quo, right? It's just denial.
That's right. And status quo is our biggest competitor. Anytime we're talking with people or prospects, rarely would we come across them saying we have one, a water monitoring solution, and two, leak detection. And then if it is leak detection, I mean, I'm not going to go into sometimes those terms, a leak detection is completely abused. But anyway, and then so that's the first step. And then indeed, when we point it out and we do, like, let's say a trial or a pilot, and then we show that 4 or 5 of their buildings are leaking, it does put them in a bad light. So we have to educate people. We have to reassure them. We have to say, look, you're not the only person. It's happened. There's some other cases. It's the same thing. And generally, before we even start the trial, we say, if we do a test with you or an audit, and we don't detect any leakages, let's go to the newspaper and make this a big story. That's like how confident we are every time.
Has that ever happened? You've always found the leak every time.
Yeah, it happened once where we made the audit. It was 5 buildings for the municipality, and it turned out 5 buildings were not leaking, and we were like, "This is amazing! This is like the first." And then actually, it leaked something like 2 weeks later. Yeah, and that would have gone unnoticed. So I think we were lucky as well there, or they were very lucky, or I know how to
look at it. Yeah.
This is really cool. I mean, frightening, but really having an impact. And I like your challenge. I like I'll bet you do have a leak.
Well, that's why, I mean, when you talk about when you're at different stages of if you're at the problem awareness stage, or people are aware of the problem but not aware of a solution, and then sometimes like they're aware of solutions and then you're at more like a selection phase.
Right.
On one side, like you have to educate at each step. So we do a lot of education regarding problem awareness. And sometimes you have to be a little provocative, indeed. So you have to be able to be up for to challenging. And I think like initially we had a hard time with that, and because I was assuming that the people that were doing my job in the past would be open, aware of this. But I mean, even myself, in fact, I wasn't aware of the problem until I did this field investigation, right? Um, so yeah, that's just part of the process. And I think as we gradually go down, as energy efficiency, for example, at the beginning wasn't something that was adopted by everyone. Now it's like almost it's widespread. It's within general consciousness, but it's also now being made mandatory on a legislative point of view. Whereas, I think water efficiency is going to go down that route. So we're still at the early phase. Then people will start understanding the problem and what the potential impact is, and then it's going to be made mandatory.
Alex, I was going to make a crack about, that'll take a while in the US, but it actually leads to a serious, I'll be serious for a moment. So are you working in the US at this point?
We have some opportunities in the US that we're currently exploring. We're still at the early phase.
Okay.
Yeah, interesting response from that market. But go ahead, tell me.
Well, no, I'm curious if, you've got, some presence here, and, that I'm in Denver, and everything that Denver West is now adjusting, in quotes, at various speeds to the impacts of climate change on, water in California, the Colorado River Basin in particular, and so on. And, there's no shortage of conversations right now about, well, okay, so the supply side of the equation looks fundamentally different than it has in the past. How do we address demand? And it gets to the point that you brought up about, we've got energy efficient homes, energy smart homes, to some degree. And now we're moving into water smart homes. And what does that look like? So that's why I asked you if you had a presence here.
Well, I like there's a particular event that happened. I think it was it out in Texas last year where all these burst pipes occurred?
Oh, no, Texas doesn't have any problems with water or energy infrastructure. You must be thinking of another state, Alex.
Okay.
No, Alex, I'm not sure if we have, in quotes, an audience in Texas, so I felt comfortable saying that.
Well, so for example, that particular event triggered a lot more people to look at and seek for solutions in that regards.
Yeah.
And so both for water scarcity, but also regarding leak detection and stuff like that. So yeah, I think as people start, seeing the impacts of what it's like to have to be imposed water usage restrictions and to see the impact of climate change, I'm sure people will be more conscious around that. We'll go.
It sounds like you're really well positioned and kind of ahead of the regulatory curve. So when it comes from a regulation point of view, buildings are mandated and held responsible for keeping a certain level of leakage down. If you have a proven solution, then you're well ahead of the curve. So Alex, it seems that the conversation before has been around kind of utility leakage level, which has been a huge focus here in the UK. Before the sewage scandals. We won't talk about that on this podcast too much, but that's now the big focus, right? And then you've got this kind of, you mentioned almost this leakage denial, you could call it that phrase, within commercial buildings. People aren't even aware of it. But it seems those two worlds are mixing, because as well as targeting kind of building owners and operators, you're actually working with utility as a distributor, right? So talk us through how you see that kind of world and the mixing coming on.
That came out a little bit as a surprise, to be honest, because 3 years ago I would come knocking on the doors of water utilities, explain the project, and then they would say, thanks very much, there's the exit. And the reason being because of course, they're not willing to reduce revenue or customer side leakages. What's their interest?
Right.
Right.
And now the situation's kind of shifting with, on one side, I think public utility companies looking at better water efficiency and helping people drive down, because it's in their interest, in fact, also to drive down production so they don't need to seek other resources, right? Think of it as, if you're able to reduce it by 10%, maybe that's another plant that you don't need to build.
With 10% less water you've got to treat and produce and send out.
On top of that, yeah. So they think like straight away the idea is like, okay, it's gonna impact my top line, but in fact it doesn't impact the bottom line. And in fact, quite the contrary, because what we showed was that we paved the way, showing that we're driving a model that is very like a service that is very customer centric. So we're not approaching, let's take just smart metering as the whole. Instead of going like, this is going to drive down the operations for the utilities, no, this is what it can do for the end user. And in fact, it's so much of a win for them that they're willing to pay for it. And that's what we've been showcasing. And so now we've contracted with a major water utility in Europe, and they are now providing that service to directly for the moment, it's for public institutions and private companies that are managing multiple assets. So the same type of profile that we target. But in the future, we could also, as they roll this out on a much larger scale, they could even go towards households. And it opens the doors for so many more opportunities. And in fact, like the revenue that the utility is driving can be used to finance the smart meters. So really, it's very clever. It's brand new. I think it's a world's first in that sense. And the business model behind it is quite interesting as well, because we price the service per cubic meter.
Right.
Monitored, yeah. And yeah. And I think like that it would have been only done if we took it from the perspective, if we only started paving the way into doing what we do, which is selling directly to property professionals and understanding what is it that drives value for them.
Right.
It's a really interesting take on a kind of new business model, not just for you guys, but for utility as well, right? Redirecting revenue to help with the broader efficiency of their entire operations. I think that's a really smart way to look at it. I guess instead of selling to a building developer who owns 20 buildings, if you sold to a utility as a distributor, think about the access that they could potentially have and on behalf of the company.
Yeah, maybe just a word on that. Like, the way our criteria for success is impact. So it's like liters of water saved, revenue. So we measure the value that we create. So that's like, are people willing to pay more for a better service, basically? And then the third aspect is innovation. Anyway, that's another matter. But through that criteria of success, we know that we can go faster and we can attain bigger impact if we go through partners. So that partnership strategy is really key for us, and that's where utilities is really great opportunity also to scale up and reach out to more buildings, more property professionals, more municipalities and organizations, and speaking of which, at this moment, because it's still brand new, when I talk to a utility, within 30 minutes of talking with the CEO or the board of directors, I'll understand what's the potential outcome, because it solely depends on their vision. So if they don't integrate sustainability and customer service in their vision, the conversation is not going to go anywhere. It's really important.
Alex, we had a conversation with another guest, and we got into a discussion about essentially broadening the value proposition of water tech into climate tech. And obviously climate tech solutions now are getting increasing attention for obvious reasons. So and it sort of goes back to a few things that we were talking about, that intersection of you save a liter of water and it has an associated energy and carbon savings. So are you seeing interest from stakeholders, partners, potential investors in what you're doing from a climate lens?
Yeah, I mean, of course, like we attract certain profiles of venture capitalist investors, and I think that's also why. I mean, it's the fact that it has a part to do with climate, um, also means that we're better welcomed also by the prospects. So I think all that kind of is in our favor. But yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm confident your comms person is all over this now, and we'll see new collateral right after this goes live.
Well, listen, Alex, thanks so much for joining us. We're kind of so much more we wanted to chat to you about, but we'll kind of keep to our kind of target time if we can. So yeah, great job on building what you have already, and also seeing a kind of challenge and with a bias fraction that we look for, and I guess kind of creating a business, funding, building a team with a mission to kind of go after and solve that challenge, which is bigger than I think a lot of people are aware of. So we think, more people like you can help with the education piece of it and bring awareness to how much water is lost in buildings. And hopefully we can get over this leakage denial. That maybe goes on. There you go. You guys can use that one. That's free.
Not the river, you mean?
No, we're not talking about leakage denial in terms of a medical problem, or like any toilet tumor that we mentioned earlier. But great stuff. Well, Alex, thanks for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
No problem. It's been a pleasure. Will, any kind of final comments, remarks?
But of course. So a great conversation. I really do love what you're doing. Really interesting about the B Corp, as you're part of that trend, that transition, and I love how you're reinventing your business model. So we talk about technology innovation all the time, but really the magic is going to come from innovating business models. And then I have a question, which I think we should have asked at the beginning. So why Shayp, the name?
Yeah, I mean, it stems from the fact of like the whole idea at the beginning was to shape one's way of using a resource. So it's like to adapt. I had already had this idea of adjusting resources to one's consumption, and then it came from like, could we shape water usage? Can we shape buildings? And also I wanted something where you can use it as a verb. Like now, our clients can we shape that other building as well? Huh?
That's it, Alex.
That's genius.
Brilliant.
Right? Generally, we always say the sign of a successful company is when it becomes a verb, like I'll Zoom you, or let's Uber our way over there, right?
Google you. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So let's shape the building.
Yeah. Definitely.
Brilliant, Alex. Brilliant. Well done. So I mean, we need to talk about the spelling, but it's iconic now. I mean, really, it's really memorable. So congrats, you did well.
All right, thanks.
And hope to see you this year.
Yeah, if we could. I mean, we briefly met in person at some point. Aquatech, was it?
It was in Amsterdam. Seems like a million years ago, right?
Just briefly, I was like, Will, like,
Alex, I know you. Well, we'll take care of it this year. We'll see you somewhere in the world.
Yeah, it's a small world. That's why there's probably going to be 20 views on this, but very important 20 views on this YouTube.
This might be required viewing for, your entire team. And then that'll just
okay.
we'll spike our audience with that, which would be awesome.
20 views, like 19 are from the communication and the legal team, right?
Yeah, well,
Okay.
I think the legal team from Tesla after that comment. But anyway, we were all joking, right?
We
So,
are, just
Yeah,
as a
yeah,
disclaimer, all joking. Well, listen, Alex, appreciate your time. Thanks for joining, and we'll catch up with you soon.
Alex, be well. Good to see you.